Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, to recommend Spotify. Also, check out the 5 Reasons YouTube channel for all your South Florida sports content. Hit like, subscribe, and turn the notifications on. Also, Off the Floor, that's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Link right there in the description. Join the most educated Heat fans. I'll give them that much credit. 10 different channels, plus the stage shows, plus the host updates. It's all there, the place for the most Heat information and conversation. Also, we're going to be running some contests there this week on topics that are going on with the Heat, where you can post your own videos. And when we do that, we're going to be giving away VIPs for playback, so that you basically can watch the games with us on playback if you don't have League Pass. So it's pretty cool. We're going to be doing that on Discord on Off the Floor this week. Also, check out Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Put down your $5. You get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks, the official fantasy sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I can tell you that I hit on 4 of my 5 lineups today. So that's the only reason I sat through that Dolphin game. Okay, 4 out of 5. Prize Picks. Use the code 5. If you see another code in there, delete it. Use this one. You'll get the $50 in lineups on the Explore page. And now, today's episode.
Uh-oh. Yeah. It's Mercy. Music by Mercy again. Heat Nation. We the culture. Yo, E, I need you to call timeout. Need Brady to set the floor plan. Tropical blanket. Open for the shot. Yo, Greg, set the pick. Still 5 on the floor, still ride for my dog. Still battle on the court, still survive in the war. Keep your eye on the ball, or get burned from the keep this mic off the wall without turning the cheek. From night to day, no sleeping path to loud to morning. The nut is sleeping us, never catch us snoring. Live from Miami, report in the heat with 5 Reasons Sports from the courts to the streets. Yeah, Wake County, Heat Nation, we say it proudly.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most Heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. I feel like you haven't been on a pod in a while. That's why I thought I'd have you on today. Catch our work, as well as Brady's work, Austin Dobbins' work, Major Passon's work on the Miami Heat on SI page. Constant stories being posted there. No paywall, which is a nice benefit there. We're going to try to have a nuanced conversation today. We're going to try. That's not what's going on Twitter. People have staked their claims, their positions on Tyler Herro, and they are not moving for them, and all they care about is being right. That's it. I don't even think it's about the team winning. It's just about being right. So we're going to try to have a discussion about what this has looked like since he came back, and I will start by saying what I said, and they're 2-1, by the way, so not a lot of damage has been done, okay? They're 13-7 on the season. They just had a 3-point loss at home to a team that didn't have Jalen Duren and was on the second night of a back-to-back, but a team that has been the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference this year. Okay, so they're not getting blown off the floor with Tyler playing. They also don't look quite the same. And we're going to talk about how and if it's fixable and everything related to that. But I'll start with what my position was before he came back. I thought the flow with him and Powell would look better than it has. Now, part of this is Norm missed one of the games. And it started to look a little bit better against Detroit late, but it still feels like taking turns to me. And my concern was the defense, and that was more an issue in this last game than it was in the prior 2. Has Tyler, in your view, and first, let's say this. The guy didn't play for 17 games. He didn't play he wasn't there for all the training camp. He's entitled to an off shooting night, which is what he had to start the game against Detroit. And he ended up making a high percentage of his threes. He missed all of his 2s. This came after, in his first game back, all he made was 2s. He kept making the floater. He made 8 floaters in that game. Alex, has he been better, or before we get into the impact on the team, is he been better or worse than you expected upon his return? Just him individually.
I think he's about where I expected him to be at, honestly. Like, I don't think we know who Tyler Herro is, right? Like we've seen the growth and we know what the flaws are, right? Even with the All-Star season he had last year. And I thought last night was the real like the first real test for him defensively, because that's where pretty much most of his flaws, come from. And I thought you saw what happened. Like Cade Cunningham was a matchup nightmare for the Heat and for Tyler. And I just thought he did a poor job of providing really any sort of resistance whatsoever on defense. Like, we already know what the issues are with him and stronger players, guys who are shifty as well and skilled. Like, Cade is kind of a balance of all of those things, right? He's an awesome player. He's the biggest reason the Pistons are the number one team in the East. And I thought last night, like, they did a bad job whenever they switched Tyler on early in the game. And then I thought they did a poor job whenever Herro had to hedge. Like, the positioning was off, the timing was off, and it really, like, that kind of came to fruition again at the end of the game after they made that the 22-point comeback in the fourth quarter, which was insane to watch. Like, we all kind of thought the game was over. The Pistons were in control for much of it, and then their defense is what brought them back. And then kind of the two biggest scores, the two daggers for the game at the end by the Pistons came off of the Heat botching those Cade actions, which is what was killing them throughout the game, like giving up like a 130 defensive rating through the first three quarters, right? I think it's easily the biggest issue with Tyler, always has been. It's nothing new here. And he didn't necessarily have any, matchup problems to deal with, against the Mavs without Anthony Davis, against the Bucks without Giannis, their best perimeter players were Cooper Flagg and Ryan Wallace, so it's just not necessarily the same caliber of player. And it was a real test. I think there's optimism. Like, we've seen the Heat have Herro get hunted before plenty of times. We know what their solutions are, and I think a lot of times it's the show and recover, the hedge and recover, and they did a poor job of that last night. I'm not a fan of switching Tyler onto these type of guys. Like, it's one thing if you want to switch them onto other guys, whatever, but like these mismatch problems, I'm not a fan of it, because it gets their defense scrambling, and Tyler just can't handle it one-on-one versus guys like that. So they're going to have to do a better job kind of protecting that show and recover shell, and Tyler has to do a better job of being in the right place. Like, at the end there, just not trying to foul. It was a bad look for him, man. Like, defensively, he's got to be better there.
I'm glad you started with the defense. Let's save the offense for after the break, because to me, it is about the defense. And I know everybody's talking about, well, their pace has slowed since he came back offensively and all of that. My bigger concern, and we will get into that. My bigger concern is the defense, and I just think they have to go offense defense at the end of games with him. That's where I'm at. They have enough defensive players now, and I don't really understand why Tyler was even in the game at the end on the defensive end, except that Spo wants sort of the quick trigger to the other end of the floor. But to me, you got to take care of home first, and that was getting stops. If they'd gotten a couple stops at the end of the game, they probably win the game. And this is, I think, where Heat fans are going to go with this, because we've seen that Norm can carry them late in the game. So if worst case scenario, you get a quick change, right? Like, you get a stop and you get out in transition and you don't have Herro, you can live with having Norm and some of the others on an offensive possession without necessarily having to call timeout. But I don't know that you can live with Herro being on the floor getting caught in a Cade Cunningham action. That's where I'm coming to it, and that is going to start a whole nother discussion. If you can't leave a player on the floor at the end both ways, what can you pay that player? And that is the conversation. That's where this is going. But I don't think that they can make the end. I don't think Spo can make the end game decisions based on that, and I don't think he will. But I also don't know that he's ready to do what I think is necessary sometimes, which is, you have Davion, you have Larson, Powell is going to play, and if you have Ware and Bam out there defensively, are you not better off on a defensive possession if you're rolling out and a Wiggins? I'm sorry, I didn't even mention Wiggins. Okay, so who was great last night offensively, by the way, but you can't expect that from Andrew every night. But you kind of know what you're going to get on defense. In light of that, like, Tyler's not one of your 5 best defensive players there. Not close, right? So would you be open to offense defense switches? Would you be open to Larson replacing him on the if that's the? By the way, I haven't mentioned Jaquez, who didn't play last night, but you'd be better off with Jaime and Jaime's strength out there instead of Tyler, and then you know that Jaime can give you something on the other end, right? And Larson's been terrific as a connector. He was, I thought, big in their comeback. So are you you open to that? Are you open to Tyler not playing every possession late in games?
Absolutely, I'm open to it. Sometimes it's easier said than done to execute because you can't always just sub him out for a defensive play and have him right back in for offense, right? Like it's tough to, the timing on when you bring him out, when you bring him in. It can be like these are crucial decisions and tough decisions that Spo has to make. The difference is now, I think, especially between last season, especially like towards the end there of the Jimmy era, is that and post Jimmy era specifically, is that you can get away with not having Tyler on offense, and we've seen that obviously in that first month of the season without him. And like you said, they have enough. I mean, they have more than enough defensively, like to kind of stock up every position there with guys that you feel good about on defense. And I think you brought up a great point at the end there with like Jaquez kind of being the X factor there, and also Larson to some extent because of the type of connective player he can be, the defense that he brings. We saw how he can fit in with the other starters. I think the Jaquez one is the bigger X factor just because he gives you, like, with the defense being much better than it was last season. Although he's not like a stopper for you, he's obviously much more playable down the stretch with the size that he brings. And then offensively, you still get a guy who's been awesome for you on that end of the floor. And then when you factor in Norm, when you factor in, Davion, what Bam can do, like what Wiggins can do, I think you can easily make the case that they have enough, right, offensively. And I think without Tyler, it's just, again, it comes down to the timing stuff. But I'm absolutely with you that, like, especially in games like last night, where it was clearly, just obviously, their number one defensive problem by a mile in that game, right? And again, like that, the reason they came back was because they put a lid on it. Like they put a lid on Cade in the fourth quarter. They had Davion turning him over, and looked like he Cade finished with 8 turnovers for the whole game. So you give the Heat some credit there for sure. But they stopped him from getting to the basket and scoring on top of the turnovers in that fourth quarter. So it was such a big reason for the comeback. It was the number one reason for why they weren't able to keep up with them in the first 3 quarters. I think last night was a perfect example of when you can do it. Again, I just don't think it's maybe as easy a decision as some painted out to be because of the timing stuff. But I think Tyler, like, you can for sure make that case with this roster.
I'm going to even mention Drew Smith, who I don't know necessarily would be an option there, but obviously would be better defensively than Tyler would be in that case. And this is the difference. Last year, the extra options that Spoelstra was looking at, take Rozier off the table. But he was looking at Highsmith or Duncan, right? Who, if it was Highsmith, he wasn't going to create anything for you on offense like Larson can, like Jaquez can. And if it was Duncan, he was compromising you defensively much the same way that Tyler was. That's not an issue now. Like, he has enough bodies, and I don't, I think as someone who has believed, and we'll get to the offense now on the other side of this, that Tyler's not going to gum up the offense, that he gives you something different, okay, than they have. I still see all the positives in that, even with some clunky stuff to start here in terms of his teammates adjusting to him. But the defense, to me, I just think you have to, where you can, if you have 7 or 8 competent defenders, you got to get 5 of those on the floor, to trademark ourselves here. You can't. Everybody knew what was happening in the game. I remember covering a game in Philadelphia 3 years ago where Philadelphia just called the maxi pick and roll over and over and over and over against Tyler, and it was like 6 straight times, and they couldn't do anything with it, and it felt that inevitable last night. And that they just can't be in that position because the Heat don't have anybody who can create that on the other end. Tyler's close, okay? He does give you a lot offensively, but he ain't Cade in that regard. And so if you, I keep saying, you have a guy who can go band for band with these other teams. I don't know. I think you're risking more by putting Tyler on the floor in those situations than you are by taking him off the floor, as you said, and then you still have Norm, and you still have Bam, and you still have Wiggins, and you still have and Jaquez potentially, or Larson and others who can make a play for you. I think Spo needs to adjust that a little bit. All right, let's talk about the offense on the other side, though. Before we do, what you need to adjust if you're looking for a house and you're having trouble is you got to reach out to our friends at Real Estate Shop. Amanda, Javier, they do a great job. They got open houses all over Broward County, all the way east, Fort Lauderdale, where I'm at, all the way west, Pines, Miramar. They had another one, an open house today. They have a new listing out in Pines. Check out Fort Lauderdale Realtor. These are family folks. They will help you buy houses. It's a complicated time to buy a house. Interest rates are down a little bit. There's a lot of inventory out there. You don't really know what you're getting. If you're selling your house too, again, complicated. Realestateshopfl.com. That's 2 P's and an E. Realestateshopfl.com or the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. All right, so I'm going to throw something at you. Let's try to do this as rapid fire as we can, okay? Because I know you have some numbers. I'm going to give you some of the common perceptions on social media, all right, about Tyler's return. The Heat's, number one, the Heat's offense has slowed considerably since Tyler Herro returned. Is that true or is that a myth?
Honestly, if I'm picking one of those two options, it's closer to a myth. I know that might surprise some people, but just by the numbers, like they've still been playing at a fast pace. Like I looked up the 3 games they played at. I mean, they played since Tyler's back, and the pace they played at. And look, just as a disclaimer here, all this stuff with the pace is obviously a huge, like extremely relevant to the season they've had so far. But the key with their pace is when you kind of break it down by offense and defense is that they play really fast on offense. They have by far the shortest offensive possession length in the league. When you look at their defense, and it's been like this throughout the season, that's not the case. Like the ranking goes much lower, and that's kind of where their defensive strengths have, like the way that they've been able to balance it by playing strong defense throughout the season. That's kind of where the basis comes from, and that has mostly remained the same with Tyler as far as the time spent on each possession of the floor. I mean, the 106 pace was the one that has been leading the league for them this season, right? In the 3 games with Tyler back, they've averaged on offense like at a 110 pace, right? So that's not even factoring in the defense, which will probably bring that number back down closer to their season average, right? But just in general, like the offensive pace is still there. The biggest difference is what they're converting on. Like, and I, even when you look at the half court offensive rating, it went from 101 pre-Tyler to 99 post-Tyler, and they both still rank highly, right, in the league. So I think the biggest difference is once you break down the shots is that they're shooting 9% worse at the rim since Tyler came back and 5.5% worse from 3, while seeing a boost in the short mid-range, which is always, it's been a huge part of their offense is the shots in that short mid-range area this season. They've seen an 8% boost there. So there's some weird variance stuff going on here that I don't think it's gonna stay this way. Like I don't, maybe they weren't a 39% shooting team or whatever they were, pre-Tyler, but I don't think they're a 31% team as they have been from 3 with Tyler back.
Well, he's also not making them. He's not
Uh-huh.
making them miss threes. That's the thing. Like this idea that again, if others are, he was 6 of 11 in the last game himself. I mean, they shot and they were close to 50% from 3. So that's the thing. Like he's not making them miss layups and miss threes, but there are things that people are citing. So let me throw you number 2. We got 2 more left. Number 2 is Tyler Herro's return has hurt Norman Powell. That's another thing that's out there. Is that truth or is that myth?
That one's a little tougher. I honestly don't really side on either one there. I think it's still a work in progress, and I think it's an obvious thing to point out that there was going to be an adjustment period with, especially as you mentioned earlier, without the training camp, with Tyler coming back from an injury in his foot, I think there was always going to be a little bit of an adjustment period. But I think what's also underrated is the fact that, and I'm not trying to blame him by any means, but I think just an underrated part of this conversation is the fact that other guys need to touch the ball too, right? And that's what their offense is kind of relying on, is guys getting multiple touches, kind of like more or less egalitarian sort of offense. And then you have a guy like Andrew Wiggins who takes up, he has his own like chunk of usage that he takes up. And his game, like for as much as he's been good for them, it's not necessarily like the smoothest with the type of offense that they're running. Like he can get those buckets for himself, and that's great. And look, last night, 4 assists to 1 turnover. You take that for Andrew Wiggins, right? Like that's great. It wasn't the problem last night. He was huge for their offense last night. He kept them afloat for much of those first 3 quarters when they couldn't score. But just in general, like that's a guy who takes up a lot of offense, isn't necessarily like the greatest ball mover, and I'm trying to be nice there. Can obviously score and has been a good defender for them. And so I'm not trying to blame him, but I just think it's like, it's not just Herro and Powell that have to share the ball. It's Davion, right, who's been there, this awesome point guard for them. And I think part of like why I was so optimistic is because I wanted to see Davion continue to quarterback with Herro and Powell playing off the catch, I still think they can get to some of that a little bit more. But I feel like Wiggins is sort of like this cog who I'm happy with what he's given them, but he's sort of like kind of a weird cog in this whole offense, especially with Herro back. It just feels like there's almost too
But
many
isn't
pieces
Hawkins?
there.
But that's with Hawkins only playing 17 total minutes in the last 2 games too, because Hawkins didn't play in this last game, played 17. We're expecting him to be back. He said he's going to be back.
And I didn't even mention
He practiced
Bam,
today. Who got lost and did not play particularly well against Detroit, by the way. And we
No.
really didn't cover it very much on the post-game show, Greg and I, but he kind of got a pass on that one. That was not his best performance. And there needs to be an allotment for him. He has not been automatic on the mid-range at all either. Some of those shooting metrics have started to crash. Which concerns me a little bit. I just want him to be aggressive and take the ball to the rack. But and then Ware, of course, is the starting issue. So let me throw this one at you. And this is number 3. This is the big one. And probably could be a whole other episode. In light of all this, okay, is Spoelstra barking up the wrong tree with this small ball lineup and trying to force Herro, Powell, and Davion together at the start? And it's coming at the expense of Ware starting, which Khalil was starting to get comfortable doing that. Is that the so-called truth on social media right now is that this is problematic to be starting the 3 guards and going so small? Is it in your and then playing Wiggins at the 4, which means you're not compensating for it essentially?
Well, honestly, that last part is more relevant to me because this is going to sound like I'm trying to blame him. I'm really not. I just think Wiggins kind of is this uncomfortable, awkward piece there. Although I really think the wing defense has been a plus for them for the most part this season, as far and along with what he's giving you as a scorer, right, in bits and pieces here. I like when he's doing that stuff and you're not relying on him too much. I thought they did a pretty good job balancing that, and now it feels like they have too many guys there. And I think, honestly, I specifically, like, after seeing these 3 games, it wouldn't be Davion that I'm benching. It'd be Wiggins. And it's not because he's been bad. I just think, like, they had something that they were working on there. I think it's like, you're not in the point yet, like where you're in the playoffs and you're just going to whatever works best. They're still kind of trying to figure that out, like what works best with this new version of the team with Herro back in the fold. Again, Hawkins hasn't really been, Hawkins, considering he didn't play last game and only played 17, was on the injury report for that one. There's still some things that they have to try, but I want to see Ware back in the starting lineup of Bam. I'm not sure it's going to fix everything. I just think it's one of those things where, like, you want to make sure, like, you want to polish that look up, because part of what is, like, tantalizing about this Heat roster, along with, like, the depth that you've seen, is the fact that they can go to 2 different type of looks, bigger or smaller. You have a lot of different guys you can plug and play. That's awesome. But, like, I feel like they actually have to work on the different looks as well. And so far, like, I think the starting 5 stuff that we've seen with this current starting 5 has not looked that great. I don't think it's something that, like, you can't mess with it. I would have had a little bit more concern about messing with the bench if you send Wiggins back there, because the bench has been so good for them. But I think it can withstand that. I think, like, Wiggins being like a secondary scorer, with Hawkins being that 6-man, playing that 6-man role, like, still playmaking and getting to the basket first and foremost, I think there's definitely some upside in a look like that. And I think, of course, having Ware in there would help. Having another guy that's bigger down there, if you're going to keep that backcourt that people are frustrated with. The only thing is just that I didn't love about that look, Davion or not, is that Tyler and Ware are going to get put into pick and rolls every night if that is the starting lineup. And I think, but you know what? They're going to have to work through it. I think this is a way that you can putting those guys in that situation right now. And Spo talks about this all the time. It's like, we want teams to kind of poke at our holes and come at us with counters and do all that stuff so we can get tested now, as opposed to getting tested in the playoffs. The Heat obviously very well know that Herro and Ware are guys that are going to get attacked. This is not like some mystery, right? I think putting them on the floor together, it might cause some problems for you there. But either way, this starting 5 is not going great, and I think it might help offensively with getting the most out of what you're talking about with Herro and Powell, keeping Davion as that point guard. Wiggins can still do the scoring stuff off the bench. He's obviously still going to play a great amount of minutes. And there was something there, like Bam and Ware looked pretty good together. And I think they can still do more work there to figure out that look.
one of the issues is a couple issues are going to get brought up with that, and I get it. We've talked about that as a possible look. Wiggins played 37 minutes in the last game. It's clear Spo wants to lean on him. He brings him off the bench. His minutes are getting cut pretty significantly, probably. It also means you're bringing your three best wings off the bench, basically. You're bringing Larson. So essentially, your look would be, and I know he can stagger. He's got to figure out the layers to this. But you're bringing Larson, Jaquez, and Wiggins all off the bench. I'm assuming Drew continues to play, right? So that's your 9. Fontecchio didn't play in the last game. Jovic did. We could do 12 podcasts on Nico right now, but I don't think he's going to get 12 minutes once Jaquez comes back. It feels like he's going to have to deal with his lack of confidence on his own here and kind of figure out his way back in if somebody else gets hurt. But that seems to me like the 9, and then it's essentially using Bam or Ware as your anchor for the other 4, right? Like that's what they would do. It would be he might do. I mean, maybe he anchors with 2 players. I don't think we're going to see that 5-for-5 look anymore that he did in that first game. I think that was pure experimentation. And foul trouble makes. In a wing heavy league that they'd be bringing 3 wings off the bench. Can I make a case for someone else here as a starter? Is it crazy to say that you start Pelle Larsson? Is it
No,
crazy
I mean
to
we
say
saw that he can. We saw that he can help guys for sure. I would be very hesitant, very very hesitant to taking Davion out, and I feel like I've made that clear. But I feel even stronger. You know, I feel even stronger about it just because this offense has been such a saving grace for them, like this style. And I don't particularly think, like, for example, benching Davion for a Pella or to keep Wiggins, like these type of, I don't know that it's going to be hard to keep up that same offense because Davion and Jaquez have been like the biggest drivers to the rim for them. And I think you might be asking for more in that aspect from other guys in your starting lineup. And I like there's certain guys on this team that it just feels very clear to me at least that they should be staggering and like Davion and Drew are at the point guard, not because they can't play together, but like always having one of them in for the defensive purposes. And then offensively, Davion and Jaquez for what they do for you as drivers. Not that they can't play together again, and they do play together at times, but you know, like those 2 guys kind of playing a similar role there with what they do on offense. Then you've got like Norm and Herro, who yes, you'll see them start and likely close together. Should probably be staggered throughout the game. And you've got Bam and Ware, who I want to see them play together even when they are staggered. And I think that's been something they can work on. Like I think those are
they
like
have
the main
to stagger.
ones.
They have to stagger Bam and Ware in part because they don't have any other centers on the team. So
that's not a necessity.
That's the other thing. And I mean, again, unless you're going to get to Keshad, and I kind of feel like if Spo goes to a 10th guy again, it might be Keshad Johnson and not Nikola Jovic, because at least he knows what he's going to get defensively from Johnson. But that's where we're at. Again, you know my feelings on Nico, but that's where we're at. He's got to play the guys he can trust in these scenarios, and Nico's going to have to work his way back in. So anyway, there's a lot here. We went through some of it. I just think it's not as cut and dry as Tyler gummed up the offense. It is. There are things that they're going to need to work on, and to me, even at the end of that game, when Norm and Tyler were in there, when they made the late comeback, it still felt like taking turns. It doesn't feel like they've really come together on it yet. And so there is this balance that Spo has to strike, getting these guys reps together. Norm and Tyler have to play together because they need to make a decision if they can play together. There's millions of dollars on the line. Bam and Ware have to play together because you have to know if that's the style that you're leaning into. So those things are these are other concerns. It's more than just coaching to win a game, although that is the priority right now because they're in contention in the Eastern Conference. I mean, they're a top 4 team. And they've got big games coming up against Orlando the next week, you know, the NBA Cup game. They have 2 games against the Magic, and Powell may be back by then. So I'm curious to see how all this plays out. We'll cover more of it.
Can I chime in with something really quick at the end here?
Yes. And then
the last thing I didn't mention about their offense, because it's not just shot making, is the fact that their turnover percentage has gotten worse since Tyler's been back. And I'm not, again, it's not necessarily him. Although he was part of that problem last night, which is a problem for several other players in the Heat's rotation last night. But overall, like
Nico
that's
had
been
5 and 10. Nico had 5 and 10 minutes too, right?
Oh yeah, there were 5
Unforced.
guys in the Heat. I wrote about it in my article on SI. If you guys want to check that out. But there were 5 guys in the Heat who combined for like 15 turnovers to 7 assists. They were the main culprits of it. I think it was Herro, it was Powell, it was Bam, it was Jovic, and I'm forgetting one more. But anyways, that's been a problem for them.
Well,
Obviously,
Drew wasn't good last night either.
Yeah, but it wasn't him actually. Like
Mhm.
Drew, Pella, Davion with 10 assists, 0 turnovers. They were, and even Wiggins, like I mentioned earlier, like we're kind of separate. But anyways, like it's a 3-game sample size with Tyler, so it's hard to make judgments based off those numbers. Their half-court defense is actually still in the top 10 with Tyler, but again, like the first 2 games were not really a test there. With the Mavs and Giannis-less Bucks. Last night was a real test, and they failed that one. Their defense was not good until kind of too late. Like if they would have just turned up the defense a little bit earlier, and then again, as we talked about earlier, kind of figured out what to do at the end, they would have won that game. Like I'm surprised they were even able to come back. Probably wouldn't have need to have come back from such a big lead if they would have played better defense. But yeah, like I think there's definitely a lot of things still up in the air. There's some weird variance in these stats. I think it's still too early to make judgments, honestly. But there's things that they can work on for sure.
I wonder if Hawkins had played if they win that game. I think that might have been a difference. And this game against the Clippers, by the way, who are awful right now, but they still have Kawhi and Harden averaging like 55 points between them. And yes, they're going to pick on Tyler. So that is something to watch. The rest of that team's terrible, but also Zubac is a guy who killed Ware last year. He was better against him this time around. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. But if I'm the Heat, I might go big there, free up Bam a little bit so that he can guard Kawhi and or Harden and make things easier on some of the guys in the backcourt. Although I know Wiggins will probably get a heavy dose of Kawhi as well. All right, check out sponsors, Real Estate Shop, FL.com, Prize Picks. Use the code FIVE. Check out Off the Floor, of course, link here in the description. And also, we tell you all the time, check out the On SI site on the Miami Heat. Alex's latest article is up there as well. Have a good one, everybody.